Hello and welcome to Note to File, a clinical research podcast.
A collection of interviews, candid commentary, and general nonsense for the clinical research community.
Check us out at notetofilepodcast.com.
And now, without further ado, on to the show.
All right, guys, welcome to another Note to File. Today is, what is today? July 22nd.
July
Should have checked that before I opened my mouth. But, you know, lessons learned. I don't have any exciting days today. I looked it up, and it's like National Mango Day. I don't have any good banter about mangoes. I'm going to unmute our guests, though. All right, guys. Well, Denali, how's it going?
Good. I mean, middle of July seems wild. We have some awesome things coming up. I feel like I have a really busy next couple of months, which is not bad, but
summer
exciting.
Went by quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
Very cool. Well, let's not bury the lead here. Welcome our guests, Michelle Jones and Jeff Smith. How's it going, guys?
It's going good. Beautiful here in Portland, Oregon.
Is your opening song from the Creature Commandos? Was that the opening?
That band's called Mount Righteous.
Yes, I think it was played in the Creature Commandos.
Okay, I'm not familiar.
Is that a movie? Or is it
What
is
like
that?
What is it?
Commandos?
I think it's a cartoon, and I think that's where I heard that song before. People could fact check me, and we also can just skip over that. I don't know if you edit.
No.
We can edit that part out.
If you're listening, somebody look this up.
So here's the deal. What's Creature Commandos? I mean, it's a cartoon, but like I keep thinking of like Animorphs, but I don't think that's it. Like, what is it?
I can put in a link here. You say talk to Michelle, and I'll put something in. I'll give you a link.
And I appreciate that we're immediately off the rails. This is good.
Seems on brand.
This is live. This is the beauty of doing it live, right?
I like it.
But I feel like none of us live in a place where mangoes would grow, so we can't really effectively celebrate this whole. We gotta find something else for today.
I feel like I do have a weird for like I'm not a fruit person. I'm not like a sweets person, but I have a weird amount of mango things right now in my house. I have like frozen mango, I have fresh mango, and then I have these delicious. Full disclosure, I'm kind of a child and I love gummy candy. So like I always have some semblance of gummy candy at my house. But they're these like mango peelers, and it's like a double layer gummy where you like peel the mango and you eat the mango in the inside and then you eat the mango peel. They taste the same. Very good. They also have like banana.
Yeah. My 12-year-old loves those. So yeah.
Perfect. Very on brand for me.
Dad's a big mango fan. My dad grew up in Hawaii, and mango and ice cream is his favorite. You can take him to the nicest restaurant; it won't be a better dessert than mango and vanilla ice cream.
I had one of the best desserts I've had in a very, very long time, which was sticky coconut rice and mango. Recently.
So good.
It was one of those things where you get it and you start eating it, and you're like, "I'm done. I'm very full. This is real gross," and then it stays there, and you just keep eating it. And they're like, "Should I take this away?" And you're like, No, I'm not quite done yet. And you just kind of keep eating it. It was really good.
And these are the problems that we solve in clinical research. When we get to
I mean, hey man, we've gotten a lot of mileage out of the Mango Day, so I'm honestly very happy with the way this is going.
That's a good mention. Good start, Brad.
But hey, I mean, that's how it is, right? First, you got to get the idea out there, right? Which means you might have to be the environment and the setting.
Workshop it a little. You know.
Exactly. Which brings us that brilliant segue. Talk a little bit about innovation network gathering, which I guess if we can go even before that, I know Jeff had a background that was at least clinical trials involved, correct? And Michelle, not so much. So I guess, tell us, whoever draws, but whoever wants to go first, give a little bit about your background and kind of, up to the, founding or advent of the innovation gathering, if you would. Who are you?
Michelle, you go first unless you don't want to.
No, I'll go first, and then I'll leave off with how we met, and then you can pick up from there, Jeff. So my background, I have a PhD in organizational behavior and leadership, which sounds all fancy and whatnot. I was a college professor for a long time. Most of my career, like 15 years, I did that all over the country, teaching both undergraduate and graduate courses. And then I got recruited to move to teach at a university here in Portland, Oregon. And that's what brought me here about 15 years ago. And then I did that for a while and then started my own college here, which we ran for about 8 years. And through the pandemic, which was a big challenge, a small nonprofit college, through the pandemic and other things going on in the world at that time. And all the while I was doing all of this, I was sort of moonlighting as a complex event organizer. So I ran TEDx events here for a decade. I also helped plan and organize a thing called the World Domination Summit. Those were the two biggest, but there were also a bunch of other things. And I met Jeff through the course of doing that. Jeff was one of the first speakers for the TEDx event that I was doing here about, gosh, it was like 14 years ago or something now. And we became friends immediately from that. And then I kept calling him every year after that. I asked him to guest curate the following year. So he curated the session at TEDx and then started coaching our speakers. And we realized that we had something that was a little bit special and different and, dare I say, like magical. It was a little bit, it matters, this process that we do by finding speakers, prepping speakers, helping them find their core idea worth spreading. And so we've decided to do this in this industry and in this space for a little while. And I'll let Jeff tell you a little bit about why he called me up one day and to say like, hey, what could we do?
Yeah, all right, good segue. So I'll go. Yeah, we started out, I think, I appreciate we started out sort of silly. How I started caring about this stuff wasn't silly. And it was, and Brad, you've heard this story, but how I, like, very often the question I ask is, how'd you get into this mess? Right. So I'll say how I got into this mess is to some degree when I was pretty young. And like a lot of people, I think in the industry, people connect with this because it's a sort of niche place thing to do. And why do people care about it? And beyond commerce, right? Why do people care about it? And I think in your conversations that Denali, you and Brad have, I think you find this a lot, right? And in how many people have a personal connection to the work, which is why they find some motivation that helps get through the crappy parts, right? And helps fight through the boring parts. And for me, it was when I was a sophomore in high school, my mom was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, and we didn't have health insurance, which is its own horrible story. She was part of a California HMO. I think she had a designated physician. Her designated physician made a pass at her. So she canceled her doctor when she lost her insurance. Within a week or two, she was talking to a client. She was a psychotherapist. She was talking to a client, and she turned in her chair and she broke a rib. And she knew instantly, but it wasn't diagnosed for a little bit, but diagnosed pretty quickly, that she had breast cancer metastasized through her bone structure. And this is pre-Obamacare. She had a pre-existing condition, so she would never again have health insurance for the remainder of her insufficiently short life. And that is when I learned what a clinical trial was, because we were looking for a miracle and, frankly, access to care. Jumping for a lot, I ended up going to law school to study health law. Studied under a guy named Troy Brennan from the Harvard Medical Center. I was not at medical school, I was at law school. Spent most of my time doing NGO and public policy work. And then about 5 years ago, a dear friend of mine, a guy used to work for me, his wife used to work for me before they were married, recruited me to help start a clinical research software company. And making a longer story shorter, sold that company. And actually in that, while we were in the middle of that process, I was actually at an event. And I've told this story before, and I was in the, but not on in a form as august as the Note to File podcast. I was at this event. I was in this room with all these brilliant people, right? Number of advanced degrees per person exceeding 1.2. And they had this in a basement with kind of bad lighting and no speaker prep and a sort of bad sound system and one C-SPAN camera. And everybody was just waiting to go to the wine bar afterwards. And I called Michelle and I said, we should do something, that we should put together something that is worthy of the people and the ideas that are gathered. And so that was, and we did one, and it was and we did it with in partnership with the company that bought our company, and still shout out to Y Prime who continues to help, and even after our non-compete ended and the event became independent, continued and continues to be helpful, and I'm hugely grateful to that. So I should plug that, and it wouldn't have happened but for their support at the very beginning, and it's hugely important, necessary now too. But but anyway, so that's how we got into this mess. And I'll shut up there.
No, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, it's interesting how things happen, right? You got the attorney and I don't even know. You have such a varied background, Michelle.
I know.
The magician.
It's hard to, yeah.
I mean, tell me, I want to know about the college. I mean, people who start colleges, tend to be one way or the other.
How many people do you know who've started colleges?
Well, I don't know personally,
One.
but I mean,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Okay. fair point.
I don't recommend it. It was probably the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life so far, and definitely the hardest.
I'm right here. I'm standing right here. I'm in the room.
You were part of that too. You were part of that college too. It was pretty amazing. The underlying premise and philosophy of it was to help people live life on purpose, because I believe that the more of us who live life on purpose, the more we can all thrive and the better communities and societies will be. So that we bring to this work too. I mean, that's partly what bonded Jeff and I together, was like helping people who, maybe often don't have the platform that other people do to share their idea we're spreading, but they're super smart people, or they figured something out that's complicated and challenging, and we could all learn from them. So giving them the opportunity to share that with us. And, we started out doing it locally here in our hometown of Portland with the TEDx stage and things like that. But now we do it in the clinical trials space, because there's a lot going on, and a lot of innovation, and a lot of people who do it for purpose-driven reasons. And that's not always the conversation that's being had. So we wanted to see what we could do to help bring that to the forefront a little bit.
Yeah. And I, as you guys have talked, I mean, it occurred to me, and like thinking about, I guess I went to the second Innovation Network gathering,
Yep.
and the third, and I'll be at the fourth, excitingly. But yeah, I think what I appreciate a lot about it is that I've had this conversation a lot recently, but I still very much sort of identify as like a creative versus like a business person. And I think that can be hard in a field like this that, Jeff talks about, like, I think you got to have a reason to do it that's not making money, especially if you work at a site, because shit, you're doing the wrong thing, if that's your aim. And really, there's not a lot of that. I don't feel like there's a lot of that space, like, in what we do, to be like creative or help other people, get their ideas out there in a way that's not you're being sold something, right? So I don't know. Not the greatest segue, but like I appreciate that a lot about it. And, I think about what makes it unique. And I guess, then that would help kind of cue up the next part here is, what is ING and why do we care about it? Why should we care about it?
Michelle, I like the order when you go first, but I'll do whatever you tell me.
No, I think you should start this part, Jeff, and then I'll add to it.
So I first want to respond to the thing I heard you say about creativity. It's the word's been used so much that I kind of avoid it, but it's so important. And it's, I mean, like being a creative, like 8 years ago, like that, it was important self-definition. It's still an important self-definition, but it was said so often. And I do think that in a sector where it takes so many layers of expertises, right? I mean, like I get frustrated. I'll come back to the question, but I want to respond to the thing I heard you say. I hear so many people frustrated, and I share it. In fact, I was in a meeting yesterday with somebody who's in an influential position, who said, "I'm so frustrated. Pharma has all these great ideas." And this person, by the way, worked within a large pharma organization, and said all these great ideas, and we never make any of them happen. And that is frustrating. And to be clear, I don't think we're the cure for that. And I hope we can, like, if we help anything move a little bit, like, we'll feel like we should take some degree of pride in that. But and I've thought about it. I think there's a number of reasons. I won't go into all of them, but I want to stick to the creativity side. But I think some of that is structurally, some of that is disincentive to change. It's not all just because of regulatory. It's not all. I think there's lots of layers, and it's an interesting topic in itself that I would actually like to enumerate lots of reasons. But I think some of it is also just because it's hard. Because if you're going to really figure all this stuff out, right? Particularly if you're doing and to start and answer your question, our mission is to anticipate and help shape the future of clinical research services and technologies. Okay, it's not very hard to say, and it's kind of obvious. But to do that,
It's kind of hard to say.
it is a little hard. But to do that, think about how many layers of expertise that somebody might need. Right? You need to understand some biology, right? You need to understand and chemistry. You need to understand some regulatory landscape, legal, ethics, or adjacent. You need to understand some practice of medicine or something adjacent to the practice of medicine. You need to understand some economics, and you also need to understand if what you're doing is building technology tools, which is a lot of the people we work with, and that's what I was doing before this, or helping do, you have to understand some information science, and then not to mention maybe some behavioral science, and just understanding humanities, how things work, and set aside marketing, etc. Imagine if you got a PhD in all those things, you'd be 62 years old before you put oars into the water in your first project. So to some degree, it's frustrating. I think it's worth throwing rocks at. On the other hand, it is understandable. So it's not maybe that surprising that creativity doesn't always find its way in, right? I mean, all of those things, right? Like most of those pursuits, you don't advance in those pursuits mostly by being able to paint a good picture or sing a good song or, pick Mount Righteous as the opening music, right? Instead of something that sounds like every other podcast, right? Which it seems like they all start with the same song. And so injecting some of that creativity. And when we're about to go on our offsite. So I'm feeling like literally tomorrow we're doing our team offsite. And so a lot of this stuff is on my mind. So that might make me a worse guest today because I'm thinking at a high, I'm thinking,
I like it.
I'm connecting dots that might not be all that useful. But I do think that how do you inject humanity into the science and technology that is supposed to serve humanity, right? That's not easy. And so, yes, aim at short version, aim at creativity. So what we do with some of that, I said, so the mission statement, what the heck happens? We do a few things. Michelle talked about the talks. So yeah, we put in a rational energy and to help people give potentially their talk of a lifetime. And we and something that they're passionate about, and that's its own topic. There's interesting stuff there, but I won't filibuster too much. We also get into small groups. We think that movements happen when there's a combination of big group stuff and small group stuff. So we get people into small groups, we call them dive teams, and we think the best relationships are often built by people who are tackling a common problem, and sometimes a tough problem. And so we try to get people in small groups to tackle a problem. And some of that is because we'd like those problems to get tackled, and some of those because we actually do think that's how good relationships are forged. And then we do some intentional community stuff. And as Michelle said, we do it by nomination invitation, not because we think we're so special, but we want people to feel that they're special and want to build a community intentionally. And it's not that big, right? It's not like our thing compared to the big conferences people go to is very small. The first one was 70 people. The second was 100. The last one 150. This time we'll let it creep up to 200. And so that's anyway. So that's some of what it is. Michelle, what I missed?
The riffraff.
Yes.
Yeah. We gotta
worse, you can have a safe place for the riffraff.
You already messed up.
No, the riffraff gets to do their own dive team. It's called the riffraff team.
Right, there you go.
We never know what they're going to come up with. It's a wild card every time. No, that's great, Jeff. All those things are accurate. What we do, the only thing I'll add to that is that we do this very intentionally in this adorable little town of Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is like 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia. And that was intentionally chosen. And it might not always be there, but if it goes to someplace else, it'll probably go to another intentionally chosen, very quaint kind of a town. We're bordering on outgrowing this town, which is cool because we send everybody out to conversation lunches and take over all the restaurants in town for one of the afternoons, and everybody in small groups goes to lunches, and we kind of match make a little who you get to have lunch with. And then we do an offsite fancy dinner thing where we definitely do match make who you sit at tables with and who you have conversations with, so that you're meeting new people all the time. And so it's kind of a neat little space. And the theater there is this old historic, used to be the armory where Ben Franklin and his folks were at long time ago. And we recently learned that it was also not that long ago, I guess, after it was an armory, it was a gym. We've met somebody who
Blew
used
that
to
2 months
coach
ago.
basketball
Nobody
there.
So you're not going to go to Rose and Shingle Creek in Orlando? That's not the plan. Some big
I
conference.
mean,
in
I've
Orlando
never
this year?
been there, but
I don't need to go back, but I'm sure will. No, I have to say I love that about this conference. So I've been also for the second and third year as well. And I think that some of the things you hit on were some of the things that do make it really special, like where it's in this like adorable little town. Like frankly, it's like the most quaint. It's not technically New England because it's Pennsylvania, but it has that feel
feels
to it.
like it.
Yeah, and you have these small groups where you do have small group breakouts where you're actually talking to people. You're not in a giant sea of an exhibit hall where it's a bunch of sales development reps and marketing people talking to each other, where you're not actually having conversations, and it's not necessarily people who even necessarily super care about what's going on. It's they're there, and like, not to knock it. People have jobs to get paychecks. Like, that's what people do. It's why these things exist. But the people who are there care, right? Like, there are people who I know who are talking this year who are like, their organizations aren't able to send them places because of all the funding things that are happening. They're like, well, maybe I'll self-fund to go. And I think that speaks a lot to like the value that people see in this and the connections that they're able to make within these types of settings. And Jeff, to your point, like, yes, solving problems and creating solutions, but I think so much of that is born out of connection. And that's what this conference really does, is it gives that true connection.
Yeah, I mean, we're unlikely to solve a problem at a conference, any small, discrete period of time. But the relationships or the connections made could, I mean, again, me and Denali met at the second one. She was actually led the dive team that I was a part of.
Yes. Well, Laura Hilty, who was on last week, we worked together for a number of years at Forte, and she was texting me. She was like, hey, I'm facilitating the dive teams and I need more dive team leaders. Would you be willing to go? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, I'm not like, and I mentioned this, I think a couple weeks ago, like, I've never been one for like liking group projects. Like, I was never played team sports. And I was like, sure, you know what? I will. Like, I'll do it. It's fine. Then in this dive team, it's a site-based dive team. Brad was on that team because he was site focused, and there was a couple other people. Obviously, I don't know, 10 or so folks. And we just sort of like, you get people who truly get in and you have these conversations. You're like, oh my gosh, everyone in this team actually cares about what we're talking about. It's not like other group projects I've been on the past. So I think that's been fascinating. And then we had Laura O'Donnell on a couple weeks ago, and we met her at last year's. She's in our dive team, just like through a connection relationship we built through that context. So you can sort of see it in real time, these things sort of like playing out over since it's happened, and will continue to.
Yeah.
Okay.
One day
You
we
were
should
good at it,
probably
Michael.
do like a little map, like a network map of all of these people and how they've connected.
That would be
and,
fun.
like, that would be pretty cool. Yeah. Because I think there's a lot of that's going on. It's like the conversations and the relationships that keep going beyond those few days. Magical, cool stuff comes out of that.
And how many of those things started with Laura Hilty, the Dream Crusher?
Like a million.
So yes.
I know.
I feel like I can attribute so much to Laura Hilty. I owe her something.
So this is just the Laura Hilty fan club is what we're doing there.
Yeah, we're part of it.
I mean, I'm not mad at that.
No, me neither.
It's just what she has to do to balance her karma of dream crushing is to do, good out there by connecting people. So she's balancing the scales.
You said something, Denali, that is important. That is going to come up. I know it's going to come up in the offsite because I worked on it yesterday and this morning. But the is we curate for people who care, and that's and one of our filters, one of our ways that we talk about stuff is like, is this something we've evaluated a speaker, for instance? Is this someone who would care about this stuff, irrespective of the dough they're paid? Right. And like, we're in favor of commerce, right? But that is an important, and we think good things come from that, right? We think that people care a little more, and they connect, and they game recognizes game, right? You sort of see other people. Oh yeah, that's and so one of the big decisions that we've made up to now is not having sales booths. And it's not because we're opposed to sales booths, I think, but if we come up with a really interesting way to do them, right, where it was actually really cool, I wouldn't rule it out forever. But but we did want it to feel different than other experiences and wanted to focus on experience. And one of those is once you make that decision, I'm not knocking that. I'm trying to talk out of both sides of my mouth and being careful. But but once you make that decision, then the person who has to come and staff that. And the reason they're selected and the reason they have to do it is it isn't irrespective of caring, but it's a different question that they're answering. So you said, when you said, wow, all these people care, you said a mouthful. That's as good a praise as we could get for the community that we're hoping to build.
Yeah, and then, again, both years, especially last year, I think it struck me too, like the dive team. And again, not unlike Denali, I was like, oh, a dive team, I have to do work. I don't want to do work. This is going to be terrible. But, tackling a problem together is, opens up a certain level of like vulnerability. So I think you do build relationships quicker, like on these little dive teams. And then, for me, I was kind of surprised by, again, they're well curated enough that, whatever, I'm a site. I talk to a lot of other sites. That's great. We have one perspective together, but sitting next to someone who's the head of site engagement for a big sponsor, and then having somebody, sitting across from them who's a tech vendor. You get all the different parts in the room. You get to hear how the other side thinks about things, which puts some empathy in you. I think, again, it may not solve the problem, but I think it's going to make everybody better at solving the problems more broadly.
Well, and I think that's the piece that I want to pull out of that, though, is it's like you have all of these people who are in a room and they're actually talking to each other. And like, when does that happen in this industry? Because it's rare. I think it's rare that you have people who aren't very having like outside of tactical conversations. You have CRAs and CRCs talking together all the time. You have different like tech vendors and software people like talking to pharma to sell them product. Like, you have conversations happening, but it's all very tactical. And I think we don't really have a whole lot of conversations where we're pulling people together to actually talk about the larger picture of things. And I just like, I'm struggling to think of like many situations in this industry and in the space where that happens, to have all of those perspectives together.
Yeah, and we try with both the dive teams and with the speakers who go on the main stage to try to address problems of the common good. So things that, are very, very important for all of us and for humanity in general, and that maybe don't have the economic incentive to, like digital data flows was one of the big topics last year. Like, that's going to be a lot of consortiums and nonprofits working on that, because there's not a lot of like capitalistic incentive to solve that problem without getting all of the IP with it, right? So how do we center these big, challenging questions and bring smart people who care a lot, who are change makers, together to be innovative and creative and try to come up with ways to at least make a dent in that issue?
Well, and that's a piece, like the actual presentations are something special too. And I don't want to step away from that, because there's ones that, like last year there was one with Post-it notes, right? And like it was telling a story through like Post-it note art, or like the year before, Brad, I know you're known, I'm going to pick on you, but like stacking shit, right? Like there's just a way to present something that's engaging, that's not just like, here's a PowerPoint version of things that you've probably seen before, take a screenshot with your phone and bring it back and like print it out. Like there's a way to have it be more relatable too. And I think you really hit, and also like they're also short, right? It's not like you're listening to like monologues of folks talking about ad nauseum things you don't care about. There's like a creative way to do it, and it's concise, which it just makes that piece of it too also valuable, right?
And that we borrow a lot of that from the TEDx experience in terms of like the format and we steal from the TEDx team. It's no notes, no podium, right? It's a highly rehearsed, beyond memorized talk. But what nobody ever gets to see is the amount of heart and soul and time that Jeff puts into that. Like he becomes almost like a counselor and a best friend and a speaker coach to every person who's going on that stage. And we work with these speakers for months and months and months. My rule is that we have to have a minimum of 3 months with a speaker to properly prepare for this experience. And I'm trying to get it even more than that. And so, but nobody gets to see that work that Jeff does. And he cries. And when he was preparing Lindsay Wallstrom last year for her talk, which is powerful, cried 42 times?
Yeah, so far. I'm counting. I keep counting.
So far. I think she's cried once, which...
She's cried more than once, but she's cried way fewer than times than I have.
Yeah.
Way fewer. Probably more like before we met, to be to be clear.
Absolutely, all the time.
Her tears were earned. Mine are, adjacent. But the no, it's so what usually, you said something. Part of our weakness and part of our strength is that most of our team is from outside the sector, and so that means that has challenges, and in some respects is dumb, but also has some advantages, including curiosity, including bringing a new perspective, or not like their experience about bringing human beings together is drawn from some of the best things and best people who bring people together, right? As distinct from what's the best academic science meeting I've ever been to, and so that's to the good. But the other is, and we have this guy who sits on my board, guy Mike Radway. We have something called the Radway rule, which is people enjoy events in proportion to the amount they get to talk. And one of the things I like about the sector when we start doing it is there's so many smart people. There's so many really smart people who really work asses off, excuse my language, and care. And so how do we honor that? Maybe how do we exploit it? How do we take advantage of it, but also how do we honor it? And if it's 1 hour keynote and then head out to the hallway, and the time that you're asked to talk is when you see a friend or you hope to meet one, right? It's if we can facilitate chances. So one thing, like part of the reason, there's at least two reasons to keep the talks tight. One is because it almost always makes them better. And also because it gives people more, it helps with people's attention span, sure, but it also gives people more chance to talk. Also, by putting people in small groups, we try, get a chance to harvest the brilliance from everybody else. I think people enjoy that more. But also something we know about the sector is there are a lot of introverts, and it doesn't mean they're dumber. And it doesn't mean they have less to share. And in fact, even when we curate speakers, those things, the small group stuff and the speaker stuff is connected so how do most speakers get selected? So we evaluate performance of speakers, right? Not to just to teach us about what we can do better, right? Not to judge a speaker. We evaluate.
What grade did Brad get?
Very high.
Really.
Very
I know
high.
your secret grading system you're withholding from us.
It's not grades. It's basically we just ask who would you share? We ask, and so
Good cover.
It's not a secret.
It's like our attendee feedback survey.
Right.
We have them like, hey, you saw all these talks. Which ones? That kind of thing.
Fair
Right.
enough.
And and what normally selects speakers or gets speakers picked, as far as we can tell, is one of four things, or some combo. Maybe there's more, but it's particularly these four. So status, somebody's famous, fancy, got the fancy title. Second is if they know somebody. 3 is if it's, I conflate these things. They might be different, but sort of Mikey from the Life Zero commercial. It's like the person, and to be clear, it's how Michelle and I met, because sometimes I'd be this person. I'm not on stage very much. I think I've been on stage a total of like 2 minutes in 3 years, right? So I stay pretty behind the scenes on this deal, and I haven't done a lot of podcast interviews. We don't talk about this stuff in part because we take hosting seriously, and if you go to, somebody invites you to their house, and the only thing they want you to do is watch their slideshow of their vacation. It's not, it feels like it's for them, not for you. And that's not saying, and Michelle's wanted me to do more than 2 minutes. So someday, but the point is, so I've been this person, the Mike from Life Zero commercial, the person who is known for talking. Right. And that's how Michelle and I met, because I used to talk. And that's the third reason. And then the fourth is if they pay for the privilege, if they buy a speech at an industry trade show. And I don't knock really into those things. Knowing people is great. Status is great. Having charisma or being comfortable speaking is great. Commerce can be great. But all four of those things map to performance less well than you'd think. In fact, I think it's also because they are both inverse correlates as well as positive correlates, that each of them has advantages and gives some superpowers, but they also can create a sense of entitlement, that the speaker is doing a favor to the audience. Our perspective is that the audience is doing a favor to the speaker by lending their ear. And that's even more pronounced in a setting where very often the most important people that gather at our thing are not on the stage, they're in the audience. Right. So how do we honor that? How do we honor that and do that well? So anyway, I'll shut up there.
No, and again, I think you guys have done a good balance of that. And I was probably not easy to work with, doing my talk, but I didn't even know what I wanted to do until I feel like kind of the last minute. But it's undervalued, probably, the amount of work. I mean, not probably, it's certainly undervalued, the amount of work that goes into it, because I don't disagree. And we've all, again, we brought it up before, we've all been to more than enough of these things where it's like an SIV, someone's just fucking reading off of a PowerPoint. No one gives a shit. But I've gotten the impression that everyone I've watched speak at this thing gives a shit. I give it a lot of shit about what they're talking about, which to me makes it the most compelling, right? Like that people actually fucking care about what they're talking about.
They really do.
Not just going
Really
through motions. And then, you know, at least I have the foresight of knowing like they also went through a bunch of shit to get to this point. Didn't just whip something out
and that is so by the time I love working with you. And part of the reason I value that time a lot, and I value the relationship a lot, in part because of that time. And I value doing that because I learn a ton each time, right? Like each time, like I'm almost every time working with somebody, they've accomplished things I haven't, right? Every time, like somebody gave me a nice compliment, said, "Oh, you're like, was it Hank Haney, the Tiger Woods swing coach?" And he said, there are two things you need to know about being a Tiger Woods swing coach. And I took it as a high compliment because I had helped a speaker he knew, a guy who was kind of a fancy guy, and he had done better than he normally does. And he said, the thing about being a Tiger Woods swing coach is two things. Everybody in that conversation knows that the swing coach is not the better golfer. And so second, it's got to be their idea. And that thing, like finding. Last year I've screwed up, and we had somebody who was a really good communicator and was really enthusiastic, and somebody recommended them highly, and they said, "Yeah, I want to speak." We said, "Great. When you talk about it, I'm not sure yet." And I had an idea. It actually was an idea that came out of a dive team, and really wanted somebody to talk about this idea. It was a similar idea that came out of multiple dive teams, and multiple people thought it would be a good thing to do. And I pitched them this idea, and they were compliant and they were kind, and they tried it, and then like 3 weeks before the thing, they had to change the topic because it wasn't coming from them, right? So it's that they care is, I think, part of the point. I think that's what makes it good. And then by the time you do what you do, okay, you do what you did, where you spent real time figuring out what you think, and real time figuring out how you feel about it, real time figuring out a way to say that that was worth the time you were going to spend, then you were giving a gift to the audience, right? Then you were doing them a favor. When Lindsay got up there, if I'm not careful, it'll be 42 or 43. But by the time she got up there, she was absolutely doing a favor to the audience, right? She was going to bare her soul and talk about the deepest pain of her life and her greatest hopes that might be forged from that. And by that, then it is a gift. But merely saying yes to taking people's time, that's not the gift.
Yeah. No, I mean it forces you to you got to sit in it, right? And yeah. No, I like that analogy. Well, what's planned for this year?
Oh, Michelle,
what's different? Anything different?
Yeah,
anything,
I don't know. We put you two in charge, so we thought we were here today to find out what you have planned for this year.
You don't want that.
No. Oh, come on.
No, I know we will be there. We'll be doing, thanks to you guys being so gracious, we'll be doing, some podcasting and interviewing from there as well, which we're excited about.
I think we're planning on doing some recorded interviews, doing some sort of segments and stuff, and then potentially a live stream at some point from it, just sort of to cast on what the experience has been, what it's been like. So we'll be there real time, and then also some other tidbits that folks will be able to sample following from the note to file perspective. From the ING perspective, are you guys doing anything sort of major changes or difference? Or are you sticking sort of with what you've done in the past?
We're always making little, we try to be innovative in the work that we do as well, and innovate a little bit every year and refine the process a little bit every year. Some of the things we've been practicing for a long, long time, like our main stage production. I mean, it's our production team that we fly out from Oregon to Pennsylvania, and we've been working together for 15 years with those guys who do the lighting and the screens and all the fancy stuff.
And the smoke machines.
Yes, but last year he added, things came down from the ceiling and this big screen. We had to learn new terminology, like what a shmoo is. And, so Jeff and I are constantly learning from our production folks. And we're going to do dive teams again. One thing we tried it a little last year and it worked pretty well, so we're going to do it more so this coming October, is that we have partnered dive teams. So just also a shout out to all of our partner organizations, because they do this also because they care deeply. And they care about this stuff, and they care about making real innovative impact and change in the industry. It's not just like, hey, we're going to throw our money at an expo booth and staff it and show up with some people and spend $8,000 to cart our stuff across the country to wherever to set up this booth. They come because they deeply, deeply care. And they carefully decide who they're going to send to this to be part of these dive teams. So sometimes they facilitate them. Sometimes they're the content champions and we provide a facilitator. But we have a number of those partner dive teams that are dialing in a little bit more and working months in advance on what they're going to put together for that. We still have all the same community meals, lunches, dinners, all the stuff that we usually do. We're going to try a new spot for dinner this year, which is going to be super fun, like this historic mansion, just a little bit of a drive away. So that'll be neat. And this year, one new.
Now.
Well, we didn't ever say it was a surprise.
I know.
How you get there might be a surprise.
Right.
It might not be a good surprise, but it might be a surprise. I'm in favor of walking personally, but Jeff tells me it's not walking.
If you ask, is it walking distance to Michelle? If it's 90 minutes by foot, she will say yes. Okay, so it's not
right.
And there's a risk she'll do 2.5 hours and still be yes.
I mean, technically, anything could be a walking distance. Is
exactly,
it an enjoyable?
Denali.
But is it an enjoyable walking distance?
Well, then that's Jeff's point. You know,
she does this thing in Spain where this Camino thing they've done a movie about. How many you like do it one time and then it's supposed to like be a thing? And how many times have you done this thing, Michelle?
I've done it 8 times, Jeff.
Okay, I don't even know if you're allowed to do that many times. I think there's like a cap on it. She's asked me to do. I'm happy to do if I could like do an e-bike or ride a horse. Those are my options. Those are.
I'd get on a horse and do it. I would do that.
Yeah,
we can do that, Jeff. We'll get a horse. We'll do it.
They do let you do it by horse. I mean, there's like 3 official ways: bike, horse, and walking.
There you go.
True.
And I'd be down.
You could do it like a little triathlon thing. So the last thing I'll add is that we're trying the one totally new thing we're adding this year is what we're calling the Navigate workshops, which are like professional development-ish workshops. So there's a lot of folks in this industry who really want to think about how to lead through challenging change times when things are uncertain, and how do you lead or manage a team through that time? Or there's a lot of people who are looking for new roles, right? There's been a huge impact on this industry of people being laid off or preparing for like that possibility. And so we're offering a workshop to help people with nexting. You know, what is it that you want to do in the next chapter of your career and in your life? So we've got several of these workshops also as small group breakouts that we're going to try. We've got some really neat facilitators coming to give that a try this year. So
I love that. I mean, it gets to what you said about earlier, where you talked about doing things with purpose, doing things intentionally. Right. And I think that's like thinking about like, what is my next step in career-wise in my life? Like living intentionally and helping folks foster that. I think that's great.
I'll pile on. So when I think about it, what to your question, Denali, is like, same stuff or new stuff? And my answer is yes. Same stuff or new stuff. And one way I think about this is, when I was a kid, it was sort of the rise of Japanese automobile manufacturing versus United States automobile manufacturing. And so that was the thing that we learn and when you're learning management stuff. And one of the things that Honda and Toyota did was, I'll start with Ford. So Ford would say, hey, we're going to do a new car. And they'd start with a drawing, right? And they'd make this new car. And what they would do with the Accord, what Honda would do is say, hey, what's working with the Accord and what's not working with the Accord? And what was working with the Accord, they keep. And what wasn't working with the Accord, they'd change. And so the Accord kept the same shape, but it kept getting a little bit better, and became one of the most reliable cars in the world. And not saying how everything has to be done, but we do approach it a little bit like that. What are the parts that seem to work? And so after the first year or two, it's like, you know what, some people were really ready for their talks. Some people needed a little more help because they were still kind of learning it, still right beforehand. So they weren't quite ready. And so Michelle said, we got to push back the learning time, and we've got to bump the number of prep sessions from 3 and then now it's 6. Okay. And we'd give people more. So that's sort of an example. Some of the things that will be, the anchor elements we talked about, those are the same. I won't repeat anything that Michelle said.
Well, one thing we haven't mentioned yet at all is why we call Laura Hilty the Dream Crusher and the Whale Tank. We haven't even mentioned the Whale Tank, which was like our pilot thing we tried last year.
You want to? Should I tell that story?
Yeah, tell that story.
It was after last year, and Laura's getting a lot of good shine, and she deserves it. And she I was just talking to her on the phone. I said, "How are you doing?" And she said, I'm all right, but I just had to kill a bunch of dreams today. And this is how that nickname, I think, happened. And I know that's how it happened. And she said, I wish customers would just tell us what they wanted to buy, and I'd invest in that. So Laura's now, she used to be at Advara. I know she's a Forte, and now she's a venture capitalist, and I'd invest in that. And I said, well, why don't we do that? And so, and one of our speakers was a guy who runs the Stanford Graduate School of Business Startup Garage, their incubator. They've done 150 startups. The biggest win is DoorDash. And the idea of DoorDash, right, is you get 20 million transactions at $6.99 a piece, and then you got a company. But if you're one of the companies that if you're Florence or Clinigen or Diligent or Locavant, and I'm intentionally plugging people I'm very grateful for because they help us with the event. And you don't need 20 million customers, right? Like your customer base is small. And if you were us when we were a startup 5 years ago, and if you were any number of early stage companies, because a core value for us is innovation. How do you onboard new things? And there's so many headwinds. There's so much current against you when you're trying to do new things, and we're trying to onboard something new into the industry. So, but when you do the typical pitch competition, you're pitching to investors. In fact, much of the habit of startups, everybody has Steve Jobs. I'll plug a line from you, Brad, is that, you're not Steve Jobs, and we don't need Steve Jobs. And this idea of Steve Jobs is that if it starts first with the hero founder, right? The great hero. And then, and very often gendered, to be clear. Okay. The great hero. And then the next thing they do is the great hero goes find some money to establish their vision. And they go out, and then I've made this wonderful thing now. And there are many stories, including accurate stories, of saying, Steve Jobs, if Henry Ford would have asked people what they wanted in the 1920s, people would have said a faster horse, right? Like we hear all these things, but we think it's also a little bit backwards. And so what we try to do is start with a problem. And in fact, Laura Hilton gave a great talk. People can go check out her talk on the website, which is to start with, why do things fail? Very often they fail because people don't start with a problem. So we try to start with the problem, start with the customer. So not just a shark tank, but a whale tank. And the idea of a shark tank is you go up there and you go to Mr. Wonderful, Mark Cuban, and said that, there's people like, here's my blanket, here's my smoothie maker. And Mark Cuban says, yes, I think people will like your blanket. People will like your smoothie maker. But if you went up and said, this is how I think integrated ePro systems will displace EDC within mid-size, but they wouldn't know what you're talking about. And even if they did, and not because they're not smart, even if they knew all the words, they wouldn't know if it would fit within the tech stack of a target customer. So that is not a shark tank, but a whale tank. And people like it. And we did it. And shout out to DIA who had us do it at DIA this last June. And so that was a fun thing. And what I'll say, the other new thing I would say is back to something we were talking about earlier. So in terms of things that are working, things that are not. Oh, did we lose Brad?
Well, I'm sure he'll be on at some point, but yeah, it looks like we lost him.
I didn't mean to offend.
He had to leave.
Sometimes I'm controversial. We have been working hard on how do we figure out there can be more next steps that come out of dive teams. And so that's a thing. So that's related to why we're doing partnered dive teams. It's related to why we're doing sort of a VIP party at the end. But the how you get into the VIP party is by agreeing to do something relevant after the event. It's why it's why we're doing webinars. It's even related to why we're grateful for this time in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes it so. I mean, like I said, Brad and I will be there, so we're pretty excited. I think he was just letting me know his internet crashed, so he might not be joining us. But I don't think it was you offending him, Jeff.
He might just quit.
Sorry,
Sorry.
he came back. You didn't offend him too bad, Jeff.
Very good. No, it's a good warning. We were in a meeting the other day, and somebody said something that kind of offended Michelle, and she just turned her camera off. Like somebody was just being kind of.
I stayed, but I turned the camera off.
You just turned your camera off, and I knew why. Screw this person. And she says that it was like her little passive aggressive.
So Brad, I think you frightened Jeff there a little bit. Like I
was like, no, that was my fault.
I think it's hard to
No,
offend Brad, though.
You're gonna have a tough time. You're gonna have a tough time doing that.
I feel like
Yeah,
we
no,
all
my
have a
internet.
challenge now for ING in October.
There
Try
you
to
go.
offend Brad.
Yeah, give me your worst insult. Maybe you can start that.
Oh, I don't know. These are some smart people.
That's true.
That sounds like a horrible idea.
It's not it's not very friends of the goodies.
A question I have, because we're still like a lot of the speakers are figured out. Pretty much it's full, and pretty much the dive teams are getting figured out. But a lot of that still takes shape, right? Like we don't know if we don't know because they're working on these things. Prep has begun for just about everybody. But I am interested from you and from anybody who's watching or listening. What do you think the industry is facing? Because this is still time of the year we have to get smart again, right?
Mhm.
And like what are the interesting questions? And they could be broad or narrow, right? Or some mix. But that's I guess I'd want to ask you guys that question.
Wow, where to begin? It's a lot, right? I mean, part of like what I wonder about is like, I mean, even that, like, what are we in for generally, right? I mean, there's so many factors at play that go into this, whether they be more broad political factors or the economic stuff that we're dealing with as well. And I don't even know. I don't even know where to start. Like, what should I be the most worried about?
Yeah.
And then obviously you've got AI coming in and doing maybe something good or bad, or who the hell knows at this point. It becomes somewhat overwhelming sometimes to stand back and consider all of the threats or challenges that we face. I was talking to somebody this morning and I was like, sometimes I just got to stop thinking about this shit for a minute, because it starts to get a little too heavy when you're like, damn it, everything. There's so much sort of culminating at any given time. It's not really an answer you're looking for. I know that's more an existential dread, but
it's almost a perfect setup. So something new to Nolly's question, something new this year is we have a theme, and the theme is navigating, and the idea is navigating between the stuff you just said, right? From what's happening with the potential fundamental transformation of technology and the fundamental transformation that might have on our economy, what's happening with what could be, at least is more than at the margins, a fundamental shift in policy posture with respect to, and how much do we need to do good science, even if we're uncertain what is being asked or required, or is no longer being asked or required. What does it take just to make sure that good science is being done? How do you navigate that? How do you navigate a time when I think some of this uncertainty is impacting? I mean, I know people's budgets are taking a hit, and we have multiple friends and organizations who've had job losses and had, there've been federal reductions in force and the own rifts at within solution providers and within biopharma companies. So to your point, yeah, to me, the general hard part is like, how do you navigate uncertainty, right? And where can you use that potentially as a source of strength? Where can you use that as if anybody's a Game of Thrones fan, right? When is chaos a ladder, right? How do you just keep going, right? There's a lot of answers to that question, but I don't think you're just whistling Dixie.
So you guys going to invite shamans and philosophers and therapists?
Largely. This year, that's
corner.
nothing new. It's mostly
yeah.
shamans. So
Mostly shamans.
Mostly. My brother was a shaman for a while. I don't know if you get picked as that.
For a while? Oh, hold on.
Can you retire from being a shaman? Like what?
I don't know. Maybe it still is.
Is there an apprenticeship, like an apprenticeship program?
I just say that I love him.
Sure, apprenticeship.
And he's a very impressive person, and I shouldn't characterize it too much, but he was a shaman for a while.
Okay, we'll get him on the show next week.
I think that's my immediate thought.
The good news is he's better looking, and he's real smart. That's the good news. We don't look alike.
Fair. I don't know, Denali, I didn't cut you off, but what's like on your list of things that you're interested, concerned?
I mean, kind of where my brain goes on some of this stuff, right? Where it's like, what is going on in the larger macro? And it's it's honestly similar. What's going on in the macro, but how do you then still operate day to day? And I think that's from like Jeff, your point, doing good science, but like mental health wise, how are we operating in this with all of the changes, and then with the tariffs, with regulatory landscapes, with just fundamental shifts in how we're valuing DE&I in the industry and space? How are we adapting to these overarching policy or stance shifts, and then still able to function in a way that we feel okay about? So some of that, I mean, but again, it's very similar where it's just like, how do you take the macro shift and then still be able to execute on a day-to-day and be moderately successful?
Yeah.
One of the highest compliments that we got from somebody on our steering committee a few months back was that one of the reasons that they're part of the steering committee, but that they also come to this event and join us at all these other events around the country throughout the year, is that it feels like a safe space to have those kinds of conversations authentically and genuinely, because a lot of times you're not sure how to have those kinds of hard part conversations and how to navigate this stuff. And I mean, we're honored that we feel that some people feel like we create the opportunity to do that. So
it's such a weird spot we live in now, where it's now political and science are becoming so conflated. And so it's how do you have some of these conversations without getting political? There's it almost seems like you can't anymore, right? Like, so it's just and that's a hard thing to do professionally, because normally you keep profession and politics separate, but now fundamentally they can't. Yeah. And so how do you have that? How do you navigate those in this day and age?
Yeah, no, it's what a great question. And particularly if like core values include courage, core values include truth, right? And where are we showing or lacking courage, where are we showing or lacking truth? I also want to connect it to very early in the conversation, Brad, you said creativity. So what happens in uncertainty is fear, and what happens to creativity when we're in a state of fear, right? Like just physiologically, right? Like we blood and or sort of synaptic electric connections shift from our frontal lobes, right? Not blood, but shift from our frontal lobes to our reptilian brains, right? We get less creative when we're scared. Some of the most successful creative people are able to stay creative even in a state of chaos, even in a state of uncertainty, in a state of fear. And that's some of what I mean. We have innovation in our name, in part because we're not very good at naming things, but how do we if innovation includes creativity, it includes invention, then how do you do that in a time when even just finding basic courage and finding basic truth is tricky? And I think it's going to be, and I'll shout out to somebody else, even related to our previous conversation around like the dive teams and what are we doing new and trying to partner dive teams, like so Association for Clinical Research, Contract Research Organizations, ACRO, like they're doing this every day. Right, they're figuring out this every day. Like, how do you? What is the policy posture for the industry in the year 2025? I find that fascinating, right? And we're working with and we're working with policymakers to see what they can come up with saying. We're in the same spot of figuring out how do we create a safe space that is truthful, that is courageous, that is not only trying to grind its own axe. Right, that is being authentic to the people who are gathered, but also maintaining truth and courage. That's not, and it'll come out in some people's talks. Mostly, if we just help them find truth, help them find courage. I'm hoping I can learn from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
well, I'm excited.
Well beyond clinical research, obviously.
Yeah.
I guess that's the point, right?
That's the point.
That's the whole idea. Now, thank you guys for coming on. Obviously, we'll be there. We love it. Where can people learn more?
Michelle?
Innovationnetwork.gathering is the website.
Innovationgathering.network.
I'm sorry, innovationgathering.network. Yes.
If you did the other one, it probably still comes up. It's just
I think it does. I think it still comes up no matter how.
We have a link that we can put in the comments and send folks. Feel free to use that. It's a great place to also learn more, and then also register directly through that. You'll be able to do that as well. So.
And I'll say, if you're somebody who has to self-fund, or if you're, and we'd said this beforehand, or if you're a singled inside or whatever, let us know, because we can we try to make sure the price is not a barrier for people to attend, and it's a pretty important value. So if you want to go but you don't know enough people, or you don't have enough organizational dough, let us know, and yeah, please let us know. And if you do have plenty of dough, don't lie. If you can help pay for the thing, do help pay for the thing. And genuine shout out to everybody, including you, who helped makes this thing happen.
Love it.
And shout out to Rosie. I got to shout out to Rosie also, because it was Rosie and your talk that helped wake me up on some of the site stuff. It started with Laura, and shout out to Rosie and Endo who helped.
Of course, it started with Laura. It all starts with Laura.
Yeah. True story. True story.
Goodness. All right, guys. Well, yeah, check it out. We'll put a comment in a link in the comments. Comment in the links. One of the two, maybe both. And we'll be back in a couple of days for another Sticky Notes. Yep. Jeff and Michelle, Smith and Jones, definitely made up names. Thank you guys for coming on.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Good to see you.
All right. Later, guys. Thanks for listening to Note to File. We're committed to continuing to bring you independent and unfiltered coverage of the clinical trial industry.
We want to talk about what you want to hear. So if you have something on your mind, hit us up at notetofilepodcast.com.